Welcome to the Building Interest podcast presented by Leader Bank. In season 2 of the podcast, we are exploring what it means to be a leader through conversations with leaders from the bank, from within the communities we serve, and from across the banking and technology industries. Each conversation will focus on our guest's personal leadership journey and provide insights on what it means to be a good leader. In our last episode, we heard from Leader Bank's first Vice President of Strategy and Planning, Dennis Walker, and Chris Verzone, Vice President and Sales Manager, to discuss the idea of intrapreneurship and building a product from idea to launch within the bank. Today, we are joined by Sandy Armstrong, Leader Bank's Assistant Vice President of Talent Management, to discuss how to develop leadership skills and the importance of growth, both professionally and personally. Welcome, Sandy.
Thanks, Greg. I'm happy to be here.
I think it's exciting. I'm glad you could make the time, and I think this will be a really interesting insight because we've talked to people about sort of the leadership roles that they have organically. And you're here to support not only your own leadership that we're going to talk about, but also everyone else's leadership. So I want to start with, we have so many titles these days, and everybody has a very nuanced title. So not everybody may be familiar with this term talent management. Talent management. If you could just tell us a bit about what that role means at Leader, what department that even falls under, and what your day-to-day entails as a talent manager.
Awesome. Happy to. So I think it, as you say, day to day, I think it changes day to day sometimes. But, the main focus is how do we grow and develop the talent that we have within the bank, whether that's creating some new training programs or e-learnings, and sometimes it's meeting one-on-one with certain team members and coaching them on certain skills. It's having those conversations and making sure that those development conversations are happening. And it's also looking at the talent that we have, how are we positioned with that? What are the quote unquote skills of the future that we may need, and how do we support the people that we have here? And, some of that's even looking at, like, is there opportunity to set up some sort of like rotational program for some people? It's not always training per se, but looking at a lot of those types of things. And I also do, play in other areas of human resources as well. That's where the team I sit on is human resources. And, sometimes I help out with recruiting, or I'll field some general HR questions. So it really kind of changes day to day. And it's, to me, that keeps it exciting. And it's no 2 days are ever the same. And I can't say I have a boring day.
No, I hear that. So what basically, I guess your focus is really on the growth and development of our current team members. And we hear so much, and I think we've even spoken about it with another guest previously on this podcast, really about getting the right talent in the door. But you're not trying to get talent in the door. You're saying that's already been done. We've already done our job there. We've got the talent in the door. Now we want to make sure we're developing. What's the goal? Why is it so important to develop our current team members?
There's so much talent there. There's so much to work with already there. And why wouldn't we want to bring up talent from within the organization to become the next leaders? You want to constantly be thinking about what's next. Where am I going next in my career? But you want to learn your current role, but always be looking towards that future. And, you want to make sure that you as a leader are, growing that, listening to what your team member wants and working to their strengths and helping them build up their weaknesses. So you want to just make sure that you're nurturing that development.
Do you find that you work more with the individual team member or with their manager? Or is it a combination of both to kind of find that path for them?
It truly is kind of both, right? Because, sometimes we as team members have a particular view of what our skill set is and how our skill set is perceived. And sometimes our manager may have a different view of that. So it's, sometimes it's trying to, bring those together and figure out, okay, so, you think you're here, your manager thinks you're here. How do we kind of lessen that gap and get to where everybody's in a better place with it? And it's not necessarily like, development is not a bad thing. It's not a naughty word. Everybody should have a development plan because it's your growth. It's where you're going. And
Definitely. And it sounds like what you want to accomplish here, if I'm hearing this correctly, is that you want to align the goals that the manager and the employee them each have so that they can essentially grow together rather than be at odds with one another.
100%.
So now on the bigger picture side of it, and I've attended some of your trainings and programs and gone through some of also the automated things that you guys have put in place. You're always super prepared, super bright, super engaged. The word passionate comes to mind in what you do. Is that just who you are? Did you develop that passion? How did you come to be this passionate person that's always putting forward all these great ideas and great plans?
It took a lot of time and effort. Honestly, I remember like way back when I was a little kid, like sitting at home and playing school and always wanting to be like the teacher and, having my grade book and, giving people their different grades. So it was always kind of in me that I wanted to do something with teaching. And even as I grew through like elementary school, middle school, high school, you had those certain teachers, certain people that really had an impact on you. And maybe for me, a lot of it was they helped build my confidence or they helped me to see things from a different perspective. And so I always kind of had that I want to teach type of mentality. And, even getting off to college, I started out in secondary ed for biology. Um, Chemistry was not my friend. So I ended up going into business and hoped that maybe one day I would get to teach in some way, shape, or form.
So you kind of always knew this is what you wanted to do. You just didn't know exactly where you would end up to do what you wanted to do.
100%.
You mentioned teachers along the way, kind of just a segue into this, since we are talking about leadership. Any particular sort of moments? We don't have to single out any specific teachers or anything, but just a moment or something that happened that showed you you're going to be good at this. This is the path you want to go on. That, like you said, they built up your confidence.
Thinking about it, there was no like specific moment. It was little moments along the way. Like
Okay.
I remember one teacher, particularly in eighth grade, that was like, "Hey, you don't belong in this class. We need to put you in the more accelerated version of this class." And to me, it was like, "Wow, me, little old me, you want to do that?" And so that kind of helped. And like she worked with me and got me up to speed, and like so I was able to make that pivot. And then when I got into um later parts too, like there were certain teachers that like I thought you could only be really good at like English and history and not math and science. And I was a straight A student in English. I don't know how, looking back now, in history. And then I had a teacher that's like, hey, that it doesn't have to be that way. And I ended up, going into college, majoring in biology because of that one particular teacher. So, they just had that kind of effect. And it's like it's somebody besides your mom and dad,
Yep.
your family members who all tell you that you're great. And, you kind of feel like, hey, that's your job. You brought me into the world. You got to tell me I'm great. But to have somebody from the outside come in and tell you, hey, you can do it. You're great. You can do it. That truly impacted me. And just to see that and how that made me feel it made me want to do that for somebody else.
No, I really the one thing I really sort of caught on to with what you were saying there was the little old me. And I really do think there is a lot of sort of little old me syndrome in folks in general. And I've certainly sort of been held back by that as well. You look at it and you think, wait, they want me to do something? And you're absolutely right. But that is part of what, you can go on the internet and you can Google qualities of a great leader and you'll get 500 million responses and everybody has their own thing. But somewhere in there, that ability to inspire and provide confidence always makes the list. So I think that's a great example that you brought there. So then what did your professional journey look like before you came to Leader Bank? I know you said you weren't going to go be a chemistry teacher. Did you have other roles in between that kind of shaped your way coming here?
Yeah. So, when I first started out, I actually was a teller.
At Leader or at another
No,
bank?
another bank in
Oh, okay.
100 years ago. And I ended up making the pivot to work for another company that I stayed at for 14 years. And I started out in their customer service. So I was servicing homeowners, auto, umbrella policies, etc. And I was there for like 4 years. And I was like, this is great, but I want something more. And I made the decision that I was going to go back for my MBA. like 4 or 5 years after graduating from with my bachelor's. And I decided at that point, like, again, I had a part in kind of training and developing some of the people on the team. I became the lead service specialist, and it was all that, like, I really like helping people. So I did my MBA with a concentration in human resources. And at that point I started talking to, my manager, like, hey, I want to get into HR. I know we have an HR department. How do I get there? So, he started kind of poking around, and I had some interviews, which caused me to move from Connecticut up to Boston. And I joined the HR team up there. So you're, handling like leaves and new hires, terminations, workers' comp, all of those things. And, I was there for quite a while, another like 3 or 4 years. And I was like, hey, this is not what I wanted. And we started this like new program of where we're rolling out this new management system where it's think harder or think smarter, not harder, and like, root cause problem solving and all of these things that were just so amazing. So I took an opportunity and I was like, you know what, this working in this call center is not going to get me to the training that I want to do. So I took a leap of faith. It took a sidestep. It was not a promotion. It was, nothing like that. But I ended up taking the leap to be a training coordinator, where basically I was making sure that there was food for the training programs, the materials showed up on time, that everybody knew where they were supposed to be, that we had space, and all of that stuff. And it was great for a while, and I got to go sit in on some of the classes. And
But it was everything other than the actual training, which is what you wanted to do. So you were in the right department, but you still weren't quite in the right job.
yes, and thankfully I had some great mentors there that started bringing me in and like letting me do like the welcome kickoff calls, right? And I realized through sitting in on the training programs, like, okay, I want to go out and be a coach, work in the business, and teach the leaders how to do this. And I did that for a year, and I worked with a bunch of or two different departments that helped them on their journey. And then I ended up landing finally my training job after that year. I was a trainer for an analyst development program working on like soft skills. So like presentation skills, making the business case, kind of, it was for kids coming fresh out of college, like how to work in a professional environment. And I fell in love.
Well, it sounds to me like little old me came to Leader with lots of big experience, having sort of seen it all, been on both sides of everything. So thank you for sharing kind of what that how that worked to shape who you are. And that brings me to, let's talk a little bit about your personal brand of leadership and what you've brought to the bank. Um, can you tell us about some initiatives that you've headed up here at Leader Bank that work to promote that professional development that we talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been doing a lot of currently I've been doing a lot of team building with some of our teams within the bank and focusing on building trust and communication skills. And I love doing that because you see that kind of aha moment in the team members where it's like, oh,
So this is like a group setting type of thing. You bring everyone together and kind of work on that with them.
yep. So that's been a big part of my focus lately. I've also done, and I know you've taken a couple of my classes, Greg, with the, kind of leading at Leader Bank and working on some of the, core leadership skills and figuring out, well, what is a one-on-one? How do I, delegate some of my work and that type of thing. And then we did do a coaching one. I want to revamp that one. And outside of that, what keeps me busy is the we started the leadership out of office program, or the bank knows it as Loop.
Okay.
And that one takes up a bit of my time, and I love it. It's basically 9 of our senior leaders have given up their time to meet once a quarter with everybody in the bank. So each leader has their own group, and we come up with different activities and things to do during those quarterly sessions. And it can be some professional development, it can be some, reading an article, listening to a podcast type of thing, just to, kind of hone in on the culture. We went remote, through the pandemic. So not everybody knows each other, can't get together, et cetera. So it's a way to bring people together and to really kind of work on pushing our values for our mission, our vision, our about, all of pushing all of that forward.
Absolutely. And what I think was cool about the loop meetings is that it's not everyone that you typically work with. It's across the various departments, mix of people. So you are kind of forced to get to know folks that you might not work with on a daily basis and build that trust and that relationship. So was this a need that you saw, or how did you decide this is what we need in order to engage folks in the loop program or these manager meetings or other things that you mentioned?
So the Loop program came out when we kind of rebranded and came out with our brand Bible. And it, the senior leaders had kind of been talking together and like, we need to do something where we can really drive this culture forward.
Find a way to share the Bible and connect with people.
Yep, get a pulse and see what was going on. So, they kind of had some of the idea put together before they even approached me. And it was, at that point that I kind of ran with it and started putting together the different ideas. And, to your point, it was a painstaking process trying to figure out how do you split up, 400 team members and get it where you're not with your, somebody that's directly in your line of supervision as your senior leader, and you're not working with all the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis.
So this was much more involved than just names from a hat to randomize it. There was a conscious effort of who went where type of thing.
Yes, and I was thankful to find some friends along the way that had much more advanced Excel skills than I have, and they created a lot of functions to kind of divvy it up so that it wasn't too many from each department, or trying to get it where maybe you weren't necessarily in like your direct supervisors group, or if you were in retail banking, Dorothy wasn't going to be your leader because you work with her regularly, so you'd end up with somebody else. So I am very thankful for friends along the way. Otherwise, it would have been a lot of, let's see, let's look at this name. Where should you go?
I feel like that's a common theme that we've had in some of the other episodes as well, that leadership begets leadership, and you need people along the way who've led you in order for you to be the good leader to then turn around and create that next round of leaders that we mentioned at the beginning of the chat here to bring that next sort of generation of leaders along. And all of this is obviously coming, as we said, inside sort of the scope of the HR department. And when we spoke offline the other day, I commented, as I have often recently, to anyone that will listen, on the tremendous growth that I've seen over the last few years in our own HR department here at Leader. And I think we all know someone that works at a company where human resources is neither very personal nor very resourceful, right? And so we touched on this idea of it being truly both human and a resource. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that for our listeners, and maybe how the growth and the expansion of our team, not just throwing bodies at the problem, but these conscious decisions of having a talent manager and not just an HR representative works for that human resource experience?
I started about 2.5 years ago, and things have just like changed exponentially in the department. Like thinking about certain things, like even I think this is going to talk a little bit to some of the innovation too, but like just how much has changed truly since I started.
Like not just new people, but new ideas in the department?
New ideas, new processes. So like, hey, they saw a need for training and development. I was brought on as an HR training and development manager. And I was very fortunate that, fairly quickly on, I was promoted to the AVP of talent management. But they saw a need, they made a pivot and a change to get to there. We had somebody else that joined, and it was like a HR business partner or something like that. And we saw a need where, hey, we needed a benefits specialist. So, we brought on somebody in that role. And it's like looking at where are the gaps and how can we fill them. And now you get to a point too where the newest person we just brought onto the team comes with a wealth of knowledge and experience, and is really helping us kind of stand up some other things and start looking at processes and different things that we can do differently to stay ahead of the game when it comes to like benefits programs, when it comes to employee relations type things. So we're constantly looking for like, how do we do it better? How do we improve the process? What are the gaps? What are people kind of saying, like, and to that point too, even thinking of when I first started, I remember being like, to update my direct deposit, I have to email my own group. And why? And so, now, hey, you can go into ADP and you can update your direct deposit. People used to have to email to tell us that they had moved. Hey, you can go right into ADP. You can update your address, tell us that that sends something over to notify us that you've moved. And it's, just looking at a lot of different things, like how we were doing things and how we could do it better is truly, I think, what happened. And I think you can attribute a lot of that to Wes. Like, he's just this like truly amazing leader who listens and tries to think outside the box and pushes you to think of different ways to do things and different ways to kind of wow our own client, if you will, which would be, kind of like all of the team members here at Leader are, like our clients. So it's
Well, for
just
what
not
it's worth, it's working, because I mean, that was my comment, right? We've gone from really a lot of growth in that area to where I see it as a resource. And it sounds like from what you're describing that yes, we've grown in terms of adding new technology and new features and things to kind of just maybe not even forge so far ahead, but almost just to keep us competitive. Like you said, why shouldn't you be able to go into ADP and set up your own thing?
yeah.
But also doing it somewhat organically, like you mentioned, hiring someone and then understanding where they would fit better, and really leveraging their skills and their leadership in a slightly different role perhaps than we first had. And that sounds like exactly the kind of thing that would make sure that we have the right people in the right place, and then you have a better relationship.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that.
So it's not just throw bodies at the problem. Let's throw
No.
the right body at the right problem.
Well, and even if you look at that, like, we've updated our hiring process through the years too. I know you are currently one of our talent assessors, so you're helping along in that process. So many things have come up so that it's not just we need a body, we need a body. It's
Right. We need
hey,
it fast. We need it now. We need it yesterday. No, we take the time to think about it and do it right. And you're absolutely right.
yeah, and even bigger focus on onboarding. Wes took the time. I think he set up about 30 meetings with me to meet with most managers and leaders to, like, say a
Yep.
quick hello, who
I
am I,
remember that.
what do you need? And I remember like coming in and seeing all those invites on my calendar and being like, oh my goodness. But you look back and it's like that was so helpful because I started remotely. It was 2020, we weren't allowed in the office. And B, I got to talk to everybody and see where the gaps were, what I could do, how I could be effective and jump right in and do stuff.
You
So it
did.
was,
And we had one of those calls, and I mean, right off the bat, that meant I knew your face, I knew your voice, I knew who you were. And that was a huge step also with being hired remotely, and with the pandemic and not knowing everyone. There was an immediate, ability to connect with someone there that we wouldn't have had if we hadn't had those meetings set up. So you're absolutely right. You mentioned innovation a little bit ago, and I know you talked about, just updating some changes in ADP. I know there's also the Articulate training program and things. Are there any other enhancements or new innovations coming up that you're excited about that you can talk about?
um
Or is it all top secret?
no, so we're still looking at different ways to enhance ADP. We're looking at, I believe now it's almost ready to go live. So hopefully by the time this goes live, it'll be ready. One of the biggest pain points and questions that we get in HR, specifically towards the end of the year, is what do I have left for time off? And we've made updates now where you can like go in and look like, hey, what am I going to have for time on December 31st of 2023? And it'll show you all the time you're going to accrue so that you can keep better track of your own time off. And hopefully, I'm going to say that time of year it'll probably result in about 40 to 50% less questions for us, I hope.
Which sounds to me like 40 to 50% happier managers, team members, everyone else, because they don't have to go be frustrated and get an answer that they can just now get themselves.
Yes, 100%. And we're also, looking at different modules for like, or how do we not modules, how do we take like, performance management or not yet, like our annual review process, right? It's now we introduced it a year or two ago to put it in ADP instead of on a piece of paper.
Yep.
And so what does the next level of that look like? How do we enhance that, or are we using that module in ADP correctly? So it's looking at those type of things and seeing where we can make more efficiencies there, or trying to create some dashboards to make it a little bit easier for managers to look at things.
What kind of response do you see to those initiatives? Do you think that this human and resourceful department is getting noticed by team members and maybe inspiring them to be better as well?
I don't know yet because
Or does it just all fly under the radar? Like it's just everyone's sort of like, well, that's the baseline, that's where we should be.
it's hard to say. I think a lot of people, you get a mixed response. So like, even when we put the annual reviews into ADP, mixed response. Some people love it. It's all in one place. It's easy. It's great. It works. Some people don't ever sign into ADP, and it's frustrating to have to sign in. So you're never gonna get everybody together. With the time off thing, we haven't announced it live yet. I foresee that making a lot of people happy, like you said. And some of the other things I was talking about is stuff that we're starting to work on. So I don't think anybody really knows a whole lot of it yet.
Gotcha.
I think for some of it,
So I'm glad we're highlighting some of these
yeah.
improvements here today then, because this is good stuff and people should know about this.
Yeah, and I think even, I think some people will be excited for it, and I think some people will be like, okay, it's finally doing what it should do.
Right. So before we wrap up here, I want to really put you on the spot.
Okay.
When we invited you to come here, you said that being on a podcast is about the furthest thing possible from your comfort zone. And yet somehow, maybe in a way, exactly that's why you agreed to do it. And so, I love that you're not only challenging our team members out there and everything, but clearly you're also willing to challenge yourself. So the question is, what's next for Sandy? Not what's next for our talent manager, not what's next for ADP. What's coming up for Sandy? What challenges or goals do you have coming up that you want to conquer?
Oh man, that's the question of the hour. I feel like in so many ways I've accomplished so much of my goals already. I still have more to go. Like you can always grow, learn, develop. But like when I think back to, little old me, I remember like my teachers asking my parents, like, does she even talk at home? So to have overcome that shyness, that fear, and to keep growing, and like, hey, look, now I run these meetings with like 400 team members at the bank. um you know I, you have to look back and celebrate those small wins along the way. And I think for me, like going forward, it's taking a deeper dive into what can I do to my own self to become a better leader. We sit there and we talk about that, and it's how do I take some of the things I've been reading, and how do I take some of the material that I've taught and apply it to myself. um
Take our brand value of continuous improvement and turn it more into a self-improvement, and spend some of that inspiration and that effort that you're putting forth for all of us and turn some of it on yourself.
like I've been playing with the idea of doing some sort of certification or something, and it's a big commitment, right? It's a time
Yeah.
commitment. It's going to be outside the 9 to 5, and I had some personal stuff going on for a while where that wasn't possible, and now it's possible again. So I'm thinking about, doing something like that, and giving up a weekend day each weekend to kind of focus on that professional growth piece of it and learn something new, and something I can bring back and teach to everybody here, or help some other people with in learning it. It's For me, it's that continual growth thing, but it's also like, we're our own worst enemies. I you always have like the angel and the devil sitting on either side of your shoulders daily, or at least I do, and maybe I'm crazy. um you know the devil always tells me you can't do it, you're not good enough,
Oh, little
whatever
old
it is.
you.
Little old me. Whereas, the angel says to me, like, hey, look at how far you've come. Hey, you're not there yet. Keep going. And so, for me, it's the constant battle between the two of those, but hoping that the little angel wins out at the end of the day.
No, and I think that's a great message because there's been many songs that have this kind of quote and mentality in it, leadership books and everything else. If you I mean, safety regulations on airplanes, you got to take care of yourself before you can actually take care of other people, right? So I love this idea that your next goal is to turn the lens a little bit on yourself and work on your own self-improvement, because you've done such a great job for all of us. And I really want to thank you for taking the time today and telling us about all of this wonderful stuff that's going on and your personal leadership journey. Feel free, any other last thoughts you may have. And again, thank you so much for taking the time today, Sandy.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, this was definitely outside of my comfort zone, the shy little kid that didn't talk in school before. So thank you for making it comfortable and easy. And yeah, happy to be here.
For more information on today's subject, visit leaderbank.com. In addition to past episodes, you can also find our corresponding blog entries for more insights. This podcast is a production of LeaderBank NA, Equal Housing Lender, member FDIC, NMLS number 449250.